So 4 times the charm, right? What I said is true. This is the 4th time I'm reviewing Overwatch, which to some may seem like a bit much. I mean, surely only one review of a game like Overwatch would be enough, right? And while you're correct in that assumption, Overwatch is a game where things tend to change frequently, including my own opinion. Of course, we'll be sticking to the usual review formula, in that I'll be starting with the story and then I'll transition to the gameplay and so on. So enough stalling for time, let's just get into the main event already. Welcome to my 4th and, hopefully, final review of Overwatch. Also, side note, Overwatch is pretty limited in terms of music, so I've done my best to find pieces that I thought would be appropriate for each segment. Just wanted to make mention of that real quick.
Never accept the world as it appears to be. Dare to see it for what it could be.
So I'm sure we're all aware by now, but Overwatch's story comes in the form of lore. There's no in-game single-player story like most games, including most shooters. No, there's nothing of the sort. Instead, how Overwatch prefers to deliver its story, as I literally just mentioned, is through lore bits, whether that be in the form of animated shorts, / hero origin stories, little descriptions besides certain hero skins, or through comics / short stories. Overall, while this can be considered a rather odd way of giving story to these literally colourful characters, for those who really have no interest in stories in games to begin with, which for shooter players is rather common, and understandably so, this method is great in that it's not intrusive at all. And anyway, for those who do have an interest in stories in games, including shooters such as myself, opening a simple Google tab to read a short comic or watch a neat animated video on a character really isn't much of an issue personally. In terms of these pieces though, they're all pretty solid. The hero animated shorts are obviously the things that most people take interest in for lore purposes, because they're just way more appealing than a comic or short story per se, but to each their own after all. When it comes to this media, the ones I've indulged in the most are the animated shorts, of course. I have read a couple of the comics in my time, most notably the Junkenstein and Reflections ones, the latter of which I even made a special note of in the last review. In researching for this review, I decided to look into a few more of the comics, including the separate short stories. The comics I read through were Masquerade, Mission Statement, Retribution, and Tracer London Calling. All 4 of these were fun little reads in my opinion, though I felt like Mission Statement was the weakest of the 3. But despite that, however, it's clear to see that a lot of love and care has gone into creating all of these, with all the artwork and such. And as far for the short stories, I decided to read through only one of them, that one being Valkyrie, a short story set in the realm Mercy. Compared to the comics, the short stories are more in depth, as you would expect. Now, Valkyrie is a really good piece, like, genuinely. It's difficult for me to describe my thoughts in detail as I'm not exactly a book reviewer, but Valkyrie was a pleasure to read through, honestly, because of all the little lore drops and just the writing in general, so yeah, it was really good. I have also read through Bastet in the past, but I already went over my thoughts on that piece in the previous review, so I won't cover it here. But if you do want to know my thoughts on it again, well, let's just say I might have something planned for the future involving the short stories. But no promises. I glanced over it towards the beginning of this segment, but I do want to briefly talk about the animation shorts again. As you may know, if you're frequent to my Overwatch stuff, The Last Bastion is my favourite of all the animated shorts, but I don't tend to really talk about the others all too much. Well, if you're curious, other than The Last Bastion, my favourites include Rise and Shine, Reunion, and 0 Hour, which is the most recent animated short, being a teaser for Overwatch 2. All of the shorts are fantastic in their own right, but I feel those 3 and The Last Bastion are leagues above the rest in my opinion. Plus, 0 Hour giving us a look at some of the new designs for existing heroes is worth a watch on its own in my books. I've never spoken much about the hero origin stories before, but they're pretty self-explanatory. A brief animated backstory for new heroes. The first instance of this was with Anna and has been a thing for every new hero since then. It is all pretty neat honestly, being a lot simpler in terms of animation, having an animated comic panel aesthetic to them, which I really dig, not going to lie. It's wrong to disregard Overwatch's lore bits and such, because it all has its qualities, but what drew most people to Overwatch in the first place was its dynamic hero-based gameplay. And so, without further ado, let's get into the real meat of the video. So yeah, as I literally just stated in the segment prior, Overwatch's main appeal, arguably, is its gameplay. Overwatch is classified as a third-person shooter, but instead of just being your standard generic war-based shooter that flooded the market for a while not too long ago, Overwatch is unique. Overwatch, both literally and figuratively, has a colourful cast of characters for you to play as, all possessing their own unique abilities. what is this, 2016? We all know this already. But see, nowadays, I feel like that aspect is something a lot of people tend to ignore because back when Overwatch released in 2016, it was all the rage for those reasons. Of course, Blizzard being the devs behind Overwatch really helped in terms of the characters. I mean, have you seen some of Blizzard's works? It'd be wrong to expect anything less. Overwatch may not be as popular as it once was, but that's a subject I'll get onto later. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that real quick. Now, when it comes to the playable characters, there are 32 in total. Overwatch released with 21 heroes, and since then 9 more have been added, bringing the roster to 32 obviously. And we also know that Sojourn will eventually be added to the game, presumably around Overwatch 2's release, so that will bring the total up to 33. As previously mentioned, each hero has abilities unique to them, and I would like to briefly highlight a couple of examples here. To start with, we have the poster girl for Overwatch herself, Tracer. Tracer is in the DPS category for Overwatch, being one of the 3 hero categories, with the other 2 being tank and support, all 3 of which being self-explanatory if you're familiar with role classes. Tangent aside though, Tracer possesses 2 standard abilities and 1 ultimate ability, like all heroes. Blink, Recall, and Pulse Bomb respectively. Blink lets Tracer teleport a short distance in the direction she is facing, allowing her to easily maneuver the battlefield, which alone acts as a potent threat if used efficiently. And the same goes for Recall, which lets Tracer travel back in time, around 3 seconds, potentially allowing her to recover health lost in that time, or escape back to a safe position. And Pulse Bomb is really simple, it's just bomb Tracer throws that can stick to an opponent and or surface and do considerable damage. But watch out, as it can damage yourself if you're within range of the explosion. So yeah, if Tracer is in the right hands, she's a dangerous hero to come up against. But that aside, her abilities make her one of the most fun heroes to play because of the fact. It wasn't too long ago that I was involved in an accident that everyone thought had me dead. It was wild. Basically, I was inducted into Overwatch's experimental flight program. I was the youngest ever to be inducted too. But it was during my first flight that something went wrong. The teleportation matrix malfunctioned and the plane just disappeared. I was presumed dead, of course, as any pilot would be in that situation, but luckily, I reappeared months later. However, my molecules have been distinct from the flow of time somehow, so I was neither here nor there in a way, and even when I was present, I couldn't maintain a physical form. Fortunately, a great scientist, and my good buddy Winston, designed this chronal accelerator, which keeps me anchored to the present. Along with that, it also allows me to control my own time, which is pretty neat, I gotta say. It's also given me unique aging properties, which so far I think just means I age slower, obviously making me look younger than I actually am. A neat bonus also. Nowadays, Overwatch is defunct thanks to the Petrus Act, and for a while, I kinda wasn't sure what to do. I was aimless. I did join the RAF at one point, but it wanted me on desk duty, and yeah, that isn't really my style. But eventually, I became somewhat of a vigilante. Residing in London now, I tend to right the wrongs of society and fight the good fight, you know? Life is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how things are at the moment. I'm doing what I feel is right, and I have a loving partner in Emily. She's great, I love her so much. However, even with all of that, something's missing. Overwatch. The lack of an Overwatch in the world is kind of what drives me. Overwatch was an organisation that protected innocent people and righted the wrongs of those who saw otherwise. I don't know much of what Overwatch was doing in the background for the government to shut them down, but it was a poor decision no matter how you look at it. Overwatch not being present anymore has given way to an increase in criminal and terrorist organisations, such as Talon. Talon are the reason why Mandela was assassinated that day in London. Though, to be honest, I blame myself more than I do Talon. I should have been the one to take the bullet. However, I recently got a proposition from my good buddy Winston to reform Overwatch. To be completely honest, I don't know how he's going to do it, because I imagine governments around the world will most likely put a stop to the plan any way they can, but he did say something about the organisation being more of a vigilante type group, so I guess I'll fit in perfectly. Next up, we have a more recent addition in Sigma. Sigma is a tank category hero, possessing abilities that are great for stalling, such as Kinetic Grasp, which can absorb incoming projectiles and base ultimates, converting the damage absorbed into shields, or rather, extra health. Then there's Accretion, in which Sigma falls a massive debris into a boulder, pretty much, to launch it into the enemies, stunning them in the process. Accretion is a great ability for interrupting ultimates, being able to stun certain heroes out of theirs, or at least buy time with others. Sigma also has a barrier ability, projecting a barrier in front of him to protect from incoming projectiles. It's similar to Orissa's barrier ability, in that Sigma maintains mobility while it's up, but Sigma can retrieve the barrier at any time, to prevent it an increased cooldown time should the barrier be destroyed. And there's also his ultimate ability, Gravitic Flux. Unleashing his full power, Sigma sends any opponents caught in the casting circle into the air for a short time before slamming them down, dealing 50% of their maximum health, which is a rather potent ability in most situations, I'm sure you can imagine. That melody haunts me. I hear it every day, and yet I don't know what it is. Those experiments. I heard it during those experiments, and yet, no matter who I ask, no one knows what it is. It's driven me crazy for years now. I've never been able to place it, to put my finger on it. All I know is that it continuously haunts me. There are ramifications for playing God. One shall face these ramifications should they decide to. One day, I discovered how to manipulate gravity to my will during an orbital experiment that went terribly wrong, which was me playing God. That melody. Upon me controlling gravity for the first time, I heard it. An organisation going by the name Talon was soon to learn of my experiments. They performed numerous tests and various experiments on me to try and figure out how I, Siblun de Cooper, learned to control gravity. Little did they know, you don't play God with someone who has played God themselves. Unable to, they transformed me into a living weapon, granting me these intriguing powers that no one has seen the likes of before. Gravity. It's such an interesting concept. Newton was the first to discover its existence, but I am the first to harness it. Gravity is a harness. I have harnessed the harness, and no one is safe. My true power, I don't even know it myself. Any day now, with that melody playing in my head, constantly haunting me from day to day. It's inevitable that I will crack. A scientific genius I am, but a sane individual I am not. Talon, they may be like this, but I do not envy them for it. They've helped me realize my true potential. However, I believe there is no limit to one's potential. Rather, one's true potential is an ever-moving goal, likely to never be reached. Life is such a delicate thing. One moment a person is here, the next, they're gone. It's fleeting, as it should be. Otherwise, a lot more people would play God. And that's just it. The fear of the unknown is why most don't try to mess with the concept of reality. After all, what happens when something goes terribly wrong? People die. But not I. I was fortunate. The fear of the unknown can be a driving force. That's what it is for me. It's what drives me to find out that melody. The melody. The melody! I hear it again! The melody! A breakthrough is near. I feel it. The universe sings for me. From me highlighting those two heroes alone, you can tell there's quite a difference in playstyles and general gameplay. Those are just 2 examples out of 32. If I were to cover each and every hero, we'd probably be here all day, so I'll spare you of that scenario. I may have recently made a list dedicated to my favourite Overwatch heroes, which you can find a card to at the top right. Now, even with close to 100 hours clocked on this game, my experience has yet to get stale, which really speaks of Overwatch's quality of gameplay, I feel. I should also mention that Overwatch offers a variety of game modes for you to choose from, with 2 of the main attractions being quick play and competitive. There was also an arcade and game browser to satiate your taste if QP and comp don't, offering more unique game modes to choose from, such as Deathmatch and a Zero Gravity mode, while a game browser offers custom games created by other players, so there's plenty to keep you occupied. Other than its gameplay, which I guess is actually a part of it, an aspect I think Overwatch really excels in is its sound design and overall presentation. See, sound design is really important when it comes to video games, especially in games where moment-to-moment decisions are key. In Overwatch, every hero's abilities, every little thing associated with the hero has a unique sound design, so you can easily tell who's who and what's what, if that makes sense. For example, listen to a few of these. There are even more subtle examples of this. While not super easy to hear, the fact that they still have a distinct sound attached to them really speaks for the dev's attention to detail. By the way, the Widow Venom Mine thing? Yeah, I didn't notice that more recently when I was queued up for a game and ended up in a 1v1 Widowmaker duel with somebody else. Again, some stuff may be subtle, but the fact that they're still noticeable in some ways is admirable as all hell. The sound design of Overwatch is something I've come to really appreciate recently, with the Venom Mine thing happening being a sort of catalyst for the fact. Which is kind of why I've never talked about any of it before, and it's a shame too, because Overwatch is truly a masterpiece in that aspect. And in terms of presentation, that's another area that I feel Overwatch excels in. It's not hyper-realistic, it's arguably a lot simpler, being more cartoony. The visual presentation for Overwatch has always been something I've struggled to talk about in much detail. Mostly because I don't exactly know much about stuff like art direction to begin with, but I dig how Overwatch looks in all honesty, even despite that. I just think it works exceptionally well. I mean, come on, have you taken the time to admire some of the scenery in Overwatch? I even made a little one-off video about it, displaying just some of the good looking or even just atmospheric sights that you can find, if you just stop to take a moment. Which may be a little difficult in the midst of an actual game, but you get what I'm saying. Art is subjective, I'm fully aware of that notion, but this is my review after all, and because the art direction appeals to me, that's why I'm complimenting it here. Makes sense, right? However, it ain't all sunshine and rainbows. While the sound design and art direction is fantastic in my opinion, one thing Overwatch tends to stumble with sometimes is matchmaking. Matchmaking is important in competitive online games, no duh, and whilst Overwatch is, a majority of the time, pretty alright with it, there are times where your online experience can be tarnished by players leaving and the server refusing to re-instance the game. See, when there aren't enough players, the server will usually put a stop to the match and start a new one. This time, hopefully, with 6 aside. But this isn't always the case. I've had numerous occasions where my team has lost players through leaving or disconnecting, and the server being out to lunch while my team proceeds to get rolled due to the number difference. The game not being reset is understandable and competitive, mind you, but in most like quick play it can be infuriating sometimes. Competitive has its matchmaking issues too, with much higher ranked players, sometimes even top 500s, being amongst those of lower ranks. But it's not much of an issue to me personally, seeing as I don't play competitive all that much. But it's still a problem nonetheless, and something I would love Blizzard to look more into. All of that aside, going back to the subject of the dynamic hero-based gameplay being Overwatch's main appeal, there is another aspect that drew and still does draw a lot of people in, and that's the hero cosmetics. So let's talk about them now and what has become a tradition somewhat.
A nautical spectre, forever lost at sea. Frightful.
Like all games should, in my humble opinion, Overwatch offers a character customization in the form of cosmetics. You can obtain the majority of cosmetics through loot boxes, an unfortunate video game staple that I have mixed feelings about, but how Overwatch handles them tends to be considered an ideal way, in that the game is rather generous with handing them out, and doesn't force buying them upon you. Also, the fact that everything is merely cosmetic and not actively game changing helps lessen the damage of loot boxes being present at all a little. But that tangent aside, there are plenty of different types of cosmetics for you to obtain, including stuff like voice lines, emotes, victory poses, and the more desirable hero skins. Each hero has their own unique cosmetics of course, so we'll be here for a long time going over all of the cosmetics, but per the tradition as part of these Overwatch reviews, allow me to briefly talk about some of my favourite hero skins. By the way, some of the skins I'm about to talk about are event exclusive ones. I'm not going to be talking about the Overwatch events in detail this time around, but in case you weren't aware, these are nice little attractions that happen every 2 months or so that come with their own exclusive game modes, and cosmetics that you can obtain within a 3-week period that they usually last for. So you know, just some context for you. Oh, and I'm still not a fan of the Summer Games events. Sorry, I guess. Nevertheless, here are just a few of my personal favourite skins. The final aspect of the cosmetics I want to talk about is the golden weapon variants. These can be obtained by spending the competitive points you earn from winning games in competitive, with one golden variant costing 3,000 points. Honestly, these are merely for bragging rights, simply being a golden reskin of a hero's weapon, so their true value is dependent on the person. But for me, I think they're neat. There's something to work towards and to look forward to, so that's very much appreciated on my end, no matter how basic they may actually be. So far, I have 4 golden weapons to my name. Soldier 76s, Mercies, Divas, and Sigmas obtained in that order, I think. I'm getting close to being able to get another one. I was planning on getting Roadhogs, but I picked up Reinhardt recently, and have been really enjoying playing him, so maybe his. After all, it looks super cool with the Atlantic All-Stars skin. I've done all the talking I want to do about hero cosmetics for now, so I want to move on to another staple for these Overwatch reviews, the community aspect. Let's get to it.
You know, the world could always use more heroes.
The Overwatch community has always been a fickle one, let's say. Often being regarded as toxic and inconsistent with complaints and demands. But see, here's the thing. I couldn't care less. That's not to say I'm not bothered by what goes on in this community. It's just that I've become desensitized to it all. I'm used to it. Don't get me wrong, that's not exactly a great thing to say, but the point I'm trying to make here is that stuff like that is prevalent in any community. I mean, just look at the state the Pokemon community got itself into last year, in the run up to the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield. Of course, I have my own personal issues, stemming back to the inconsistent complaints and demands comment I made, where players will often highly request that a hero gets nerfed because they're broken, but only because they can't one-trick their way through competitive anymore, and actually have to play another hero, one they don't know how to play because they're a one-trick pony. Take Genji recently for example. He got buffed to the point where he was actually usable in competitive, but then after enough people complained that he was too OP, he got nerfed pretty much immediately. It's demands and complaints like these from people who think they know what's best that tends to get on a lot of people's nerves, including my own. I'm not a high level player, so I'm not super knowledgeable about meta and such, but even I can tell when a judgment/decision is asinine. Of course, I understand that community feedback is important, but not all feedback is necessarily good at the end of the day. However, highlighting a portion of the community as the vocal minority is important because, yeah, often it's just a small portion of a fan base that can affect the outside perspective of one, hence the vocal minority. And that's why I'm here to talk about the more positive aspects of the community, highlighting some of the great work you can see and some of the great people. When it comes to community created contents, the Overwatch community ranks highly in that regard. Cosplays, artwork, you name it. A lot of people have created some really great stuff, and you can see just some of it for yourself on screen now. Of course, nothing's going to beat Xenoblade in community created content, but that's a subject for another day. Maybe. No promises. Jokes aside, all of it's truly amazing, and it's great to still see stuff like fan art to this day, even 4 years after Overwatch released. It's nice, you know? To conclude this segment, other than the annoyingly vocal minority, the Overwatch community is a pretty pleasant one, and I'm glad to be a part of it still.
Monsieur, does this mean Overwatch is back?
Yes. Yes, we are.
All in all, I love Overwatch. I never have stopped loving Overwatch. Sure, I've gotten frustrated with the game at times, but that was more so towards the online experience. More specifically, the stuff that just tends to happen in game, and not towards the core game itself. I've gotten many hours out of this game. Just look at my playtime for God's sake. I wouldn't put that much time into a game I don't like or enjoy. That'd be insane. Due to the fact, I can safely say I still enjoy Overwatch, even 4 years later. A lot of players have dropped off from Overwatch, whether that be because of game balancing issues or community issues, but there still remains a sizable player base. Admittedly, I've gotten to the point where I can recognise player names because I'm seeing them often, partly only because of the smaller player base, but in a way, I find that oddly comforting. It's hard to explain. As well as being a game I still thoroughly enjoy to this day, it also holds a special place in my heart, not just for the fact, but also because of the friends I met through it. Long-time viewers will probably recognise the name Atom. Well, I met him through Overwatch in 2017, and since then, he's become my best friend. Other people too, one or two for better or worse, but the majority of people I've met through Overwatch I greatly appreciate because If Overwatch didn't exist, then I probably wouldn't have met them. If your name is here and you're watching, you're one of them, so thank you. Also, a huge thank you to the team behind Overwatch as well. All these years later, even for all the flack they've gotten, they didn't give up and abandon the game. They're still actively supporting it. I believe this message from Samito, a prominent Overwatch personality, sums it up all pretty well.
We need to give Blizzard's team the credit they deserve when it comes to after the past 9 months of patching the game. I think this game is in one of the best states it's ever been. So everyone, if you loved Overwatch at one point and you kind of had a falling out with the game, or for whatever reason you just got bored or something, like, this would be the best time to come back in and enjoy it for what it is.
I've said this before, but no matter what happens with Overwatch, no matter what the future holds, it's always going to hold a special place in my heart, as I'm sure it will continue to be for a lot of other people. You'd be surprised.
Die.